everyone. Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. I'm back today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm really excited to have John on here with us. John is actually one of our MBA students who just recently finished going through the summer associate recruiting process. And obviously, the summer associate process is a bit different from the summer analyst process, which you guys probably have heard more about when it comes to hearing from our clients. And so I'm excited to get John on here today to talk to you guys about his journey and his recruiting experience, and hopefully just give you guys some insights that could potentially help you with your own process as well. So John, thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us, man. To start out, if you could maybe just introduce yourself real quick so that our listeners kind of have a sense for your background and who you are as a candidate.
Yeah, so I'm John Mellon, originally from the Bay Area. I went to Wake Forest University in North Carolina and double majored in chemistry and psychology. And then for the last 7 years, I was doing virtual data room sales at Intralinks and Donnelly. So that was kind of selling the due diligence platform that bankers use. And I decided to get an MBA at Berkeley, and I joined the Wall Street Mastermind program about 2 months into that MBA.
Cool, awesome. So take us back to like the beginning. Obviously, I assume you decided to get the MBA because you wanted to pivot into banking. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the only reason I got the MBA.
Okay. And so like, what were you doing? Like, did you start preparing like as soon as you got to business school, or like what were you doing in the beginning when it came to, recruiting prep? Was it like just using the resources that were available at school, or how did you go about it?
Yeah, I did a training the street thing over the summer, which ended up not being that useful, but it definitely took a lot of time. And then Berkeley MBA actually has like a fair amount of resources. So like in August and July, September, that time I was using the on-campus resources a lot. I think the big thing was just like I didn't know how much I trusted those resources because it was kind of like administrative people at Berkeley that had been working that job for 20 years. And so while they talked to a lot of candidates, they didn't really know how bankers think. And given my exposure to bankers from my former job, I kind of knew that these people were a little bit out of touch, and so I wanted to get kind of an external opinion.
Okay. That's interesting because I think a lot of times, like when we speak to MBA students, it sounds like you have a slightly different mentality from some other people that we've spoken to, where I think a lot of people, when they think about going to business school, because you're paying like a ton of money to go get this degree, right? Like it's probably over $200,000 for 2 years or something, right? And then there's also obviously a huge opportunity cost of not working while you're in school. And so people kind of have this idea like, hey, this is what I'm paying the school to help me do. Right? I'm paying the school to help me get this job. And so the school should be able to do that for me in theory, right? Like, what do you think about that? Because a lot of people are like, my career services, like that's what I'm paying for, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think first of all, when you're going to an MBA, you're going to see a lot of people spend $50,000 vacationing. So, like, the cost of this program is pretty small. And so, if it's the difference between getting a top tier offer versus like a bottom tier offer, it's literally no money in the scope of your banking income. So that's kind of the way I was perceiving it. Is like it seemed like I was going to get an offer, but I mean, I feel like this program was a part of me getting the best offer. And so, I think that's really how I'm looking at it. The other thing was just that, like, I mean, like the school definitely has a lot of resources, but it just, why not get a second opinion and why not get like a more objective opinion? And one thing I did notice about the Berkeley program is that the people who are running it have their own priorities, like mostly about defending the integrity of their program. And so like they were often encouraging me into kind of like basically any bank that doesn't officially recruit through them, like Catalyst, for instance, they were like very against me joining that over a firm that was officially in their program. And so there was like a conflict of interest that I observed pretty early on. And I think just because I have like the good fortune of having worked in this industry prior, I kind of knew that something was off. And so I think it's just always good to get kind of like a coach in anything you're doing to be the best you can be.
Interesting. So you're saying for the school, for the banks that don't come and recruit on campus, or if Berkeley's not a target school for them, they would much rather steer you towards the banks that do recruit on campus, because those are the banks that they're trying to maintain relationships with.
Yeah. So, for example, I got an offer from Bank of America and an offer from RBC in December before the official Haas recruiting cycle. and they were very adamant about me not taking those offers, which I chose not to do. But at the same time, it was like an offer is an offer, and like once you're in, you can lateral pretty easily. So it was just like clear that this guy who's running the program is like not looking out for me; he's looking out for his job, and so that's kind of one issue.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I'm guessing they probably there's probably some KPI they have to hit in terms of offers given to students versus offers accepted or something, and that's probably I see the conflict of interest you're talking about. I've actually never even thought about that before, but that's a great point. For me, the way I usually talk to people about it is like it's exactly what you said, which is most people that want to go in as an associate, like the sole reason why they invested all this time and money to go to business school is to get this job. And so like not everyone who makes that investment ends up getting the job though. So like the worst thing that could happen is if you invest 6 figures and 2 years of your life to go back to school for the sole purpose of getting into banking, and then you end up not getting into banking somehow, then like that's a huge opportunity cost, right? And so when you think about what you're already investing versus like what you would invest into something like Wall Street Mastermind to have someone coach you, it's like a very small, it's almost like an insurance policy that you're taking out, and it's a very small premium relative to like what you're already investing, right? So like the risk reward is, I would say, is asymmetrical in a good way, right? And the other point is exactly what you said, which is if you end up at a top bank versus if you end up at like lower tiered bank, in the long run, since like being an associate is not like, oh, 2 years and you're out, right? Like a lot of times, like this could end up being like like you could end up being a career banker, right? And so like ending up at the right bank or the right group can have a long-term impact on your career trajectory, which is like I don't even know how to quantify the value of ending up at a better bank, but it's certainly, I don't think it's an understatement to say probably 6 to 7 figures over the long run, maybe more. I don't know, right? So I think like I agree with what you said there. I guess then you came into Wall Street Mastermind, and I guess you've been in it since, what was it, like October-ish, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. So, and then like obviously most of recruiting happens during the first semester of your first year in business school, right? And so typically by like late December or early January-ish is like when most of the offers are given, at least if you're aiming for like a bulge bracket early boutique bank, right? And so can you walk us through like the last, I guess 3+ months or so? Like what was that process like for you, and what did you do inside of the program, and like what did you find to be, I guess, most helpful for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you start out with like the mindset videos, and I think those are always just useful. Like I've read tons of mindset books, but I think it's just always good to kind of have that reminder. And I think like the 7 whys is a great thing that like kind of resonates, which is just like stay focused, right? This is kind of the point. But it's easy to get like distracted or to like get anxious and then not want to do work. And so I think the thing that the program helped me the most with initially was I had the Breaking into Wall Street guides, and it's like 1,000 pages of information. It makes it seem so daunting. And so with the technical accelerated thing that you guys have going on, that in 3 or 4 days I was able to get through all the technical concepts, and it like really got about 90% of the information you could ever need to know, like in the hardest interview is in there. And so it really makes it easy, and then it makes all of the other any additional like preparation you want to do technically a lot more approachable. In the same way, I thought that the database of interview questions is like super helpful, because those are very recent questions from the banks you're likely going to be interviewing with, and so it gives you a good idea of what to expect. Like I don't think I really got asked any question that was way out of bounds of what's on the Wall Street Mastermind database. And then I think that the main thing that actually drew me into the program was the behavioral stuff. So like I wanted a second opinion on how I was presenting my story and how I was framing my my behavioral situational questions. And I think the frameworks that were presented are very useful. And I mean, like you will get asked questions that are a little bit different, but if you can basically just kind of reapply what you learned in the behavioral stuff pretty easily. And it's really just your answers sound so much smarter if they're structured and short, because no one really wants to listen that much, and they're just trying to see like, have you been in a situation like this, and do you know how that would play out in banking, basically. And so using structure definitely helps. So I guess yeah, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but those were the things that helped me the most early on.
Oops, sorry, I was on mute there. But I was just saying, for sure, like, I mean, basically, if you just break down the interview process, it's like behavioral interviews and technical interviews, right? Like on the technical interview side, I mean, I think the key thing that I heard you talk about is like, hey, in 3 or 4 days, you were able to get like 90%, you were able to learn 90% of the information that you needed. I think like that's the part that most people don't realize is a lot of people when they use these guides or they take these financial modeling courses, which sounds kind of similar to like a training the street thing that you did, um, they spend a lot of time like going through like memorizing all the questions and making flashcards and there's a 400 questions guide and that's one way to do it, but it's very time consuming and also like the way you memorize those answers or those questions that you memorize may not be, most likely will not be the exact questions that you get asked, right? So like if all you're doing is like memorizing the answers and you don't know how to apply it to different situations, that's just not going to work, right? But like if you learn it the other way, which is you learn the underlying concepts as opposed to memorizing the answers, it doesn't need to take that long, right? Like I think that entire technical module that you guys go through like is probably around 20 hours in total. That's why you were able to get through it in just 3 to 4 days, right? And so like time obviously is very important because the recruiting timeline is so like accelerated, right? Like it all happens within like just a couple months and it's during your first semester when you're already super busy. And so that's one. And then like on the behavioral side, I think like before you came to us, you had already gotten some feedback from career services on your answers. And I think you had also, I think you were telling me before, like you had done some mock interviews as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had been doing a lot of coffee chats where they ask some behaviorals, and then yeah, there's definitely a lot of feedback from the Haas program. But what I observed with the Haas program was that a lot of the times they are like really encouraging because they want you to stay confident, but that doesn't make you like the best, right? So like you can get a tier 3 offer by just being confident and having an okay answer, but I was really looking for a place to kind of give an A+ answer.
Right. Yeah, it's like, do you want the person to be, do you want the person who's giving you feedback to be like really nice, or do you want the person who's giving feedback to be like your harshest critic and nitpick at every little thing you're doing so that you can like basically perform the best when you're actually in the interview yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because your interviewer is not going to go easy on you, and they're probably going to nitpick everything you're saying.
Mhm.
So that makes sense. I mean, I think like that's partially it's partially being nice, but I think also partially like at least in our experience, when people do mocks with other people who haven't really been through the gauntlet or like who haven't really like gone through the type of rigorous interview that investment banking interviews tend to be, like their bar is just a little bit different, right? Like I think maybe a lot of answers would be fine for like, I don't know, your regular 9 to 5 jobs where it's not as competitive. But then like when it comes to investment banking, everyone who's going for it, they're all super qualified. It's like, how do you just make your answer stand out that much more, right? And that's when you have to like, the difference I feel like between getting the offer and not getting the offer, a lot of times is like, it's very marginal. It's not like, because most of your competition at Haas is not like it's not like they're just chumps, right? Like everyone has like a certain level of qualifications already, right? And if you're able to get into business school, you're probably like decently well spoken, and still like what separates you is like really in the margins, right? So it's like the small things that sometimes don't get identified if the person giving you feedback is not experienced enough, I guess. Um, I guess one thing that I'm curious about, and maybe a lot of other people are curious about too. I don't know if you have statistics around this, but do you have a rough sense for like, what percentage of the MBA students wanted to get into investment banking, and then also like ultimately like what percentage of those students actually ended up getting in?
Yeah, so I think that 30 started out at Berkeley, and then I would say that probably like 20 or 25 were doing it pretty seriously, and I think about 16 have gotten in so far. So the actual yield is pretty high. But like to your point earlier, I would say that I had A minus of a Goldman interview. Like it felt very good, and I did almost everything right, and every single answer I got like pretty positive feedback from, and I still did not get the offer. I think I was probably number two from Haas, but those margins are razor thin, and so they ended up picking an M&A lawyer, and so I think that they knew that he had the ability to do 16-hour days, but I think that yeah, that those margins are razor thin, and kind of there are 16 slots at Haas out of 20 or something, but where you get placed in those 16 is pretty wide range.
Got it. So you're just saying like if you can't get into a top school, your odds of getting an offer are pretty good. It's like going to be way better than most places, but it's a matter of like within those
Mm-hmm.
places, like how good of a bank can you get into? Because most of these top banks, I guess there aren't that many associate spots available. So like probably for like every 8 analyst positions, there's maybe like one associate position, and then some associates are direct promotes from analysts to associates. And so like of the rest, maybe they have like one or two spots for each school, and you kind of have to be like at the top of the pile every single time, basically.
Yeah, so I think if you go to like a top 5 or 10 business school, there's going to be like one slot per bank. And so, there's 5 top banks maybe. And so then if you're not, like there's 15 people that make it, but only 5 top banks. And so you have to be in the top third of your already very competitive business school to do it and to get there. And so I think that's kind of where the value of this program can give you an edge, right?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's all it comes down to, right? It's just like if we were to really sum it up in a succinct way, it's just like, hey, investment banking recruiting is very competitive. There are a lot of really qualified people going for it, and all you're looking for is like an edge, right? It's kind of like how I don't know if you did this, but I know a lot of people who apply to business schools use like MBA mission consultants, and it's kind of the same idea, right? And so the top banks like Goldman, like Morgan Stanley, like Evercore, like Centerview, like these banks, um, they have an even lower acceptance rate than the top business schools. And so it's just like when you're talking about the degree of difficulty and just how selective it is,
Mm-hmm.
obviously like every little competitive advantage you can never have too many advantages, I guess. Let's just put it that way, right? And so that makes a lot of sense. So I guess like what was like the outcome for you in the end? Then like you mentioned earlier, you got an offer from Bank of America, you got an offer from RBC, but you didn't take those offers, right? Did you get like what other offers did you end up getting?
So I got an offer from Citigroup, which is what I've accepted, Citigroup Tech in San Francisco. And then I chose not to progress with JP Morgan just because I talked to a lot of senior bankers, and I had heard that they're really working hard over there. So it didn't seem like the churn going on seemed like something that wasn't a good career move. But then I progressed to just before Super Day with Morgan Stanley. So I did a first round there. I did a Super Day with Goldman and a Super Day with Catalyst. And so I basically got, to the door for basically every top bank except for JPM, which I chose not to pursue. And so the way I'm viewing it is that, Citi's still a top bulge, and I'm going to be able to have a lot of lateral opportunity on the road if that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, you felt like culturally they were kind of the best fit for you. And obviously if you're going to do banking for a while, then that's quite important as well as that making sure there's a good fit, right?
Yeah, I mean, they definitely have a good culture fit. And then also, they've done like 3 pretty major senior hires, including JP Morgan's head of software investment banking, which is like what I want to do. And so I kind of view it as a growth opportunity. Like at Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, or Goldman Sachs, the growth is already there. I think the teams are pretty scaled out. But if you get in somewhere like Citi, which is, strong but not the biggest it could be, and it grows, you can get promoted faster. And so that seems, at Goldman, you're going to be competing with the best people in the world for that VP slot. And so this seems like a growth opportunity in a place where I want to be for 16 hours a day.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not 16 hours a day for too long. Hopefully, I know it gets better over time. But I guess one last question for you. Now that you've gone through the process and you're on the other side of this, is there any like just maybe one piece of advice that maybe you got from someone who, when you were going through this, that just really helped you a lot, and maybe it's something that you want to pass on to other MBA candidates who are just starting out?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of corny, but like seeing the value in like who you really are, I think is the most important way to shine in the process. And like you are good enough. Like if you've gotten into a good MBA, you're definitely good enough. And the biggest thing that gets people filtered out are people that are like being fake or like trying to be who they're supposed to be. Like everyone can see that pretty easily. And so just what I saw was the people that had the most authentic confidence, which it took me a lot of time to like kind of accept coming from a sales background that like I am good enough to do this very quantitative job. I think that which this program helped me with, honestly, I think that's the biggest thing that can kind of make you shine, especially early in the coffee chat process when you're trying to separate yourself and get an opportunity to interview.
Interesting. So you're just saying like sometimes because you don't have a finance background, the hardest part is actually just like the mental game of like believing in yourself and knowing that you are qualified for this and you are good enough. Because that obviously, I mean, the way you feel about yourself is going to kind of like show through everything else you're doing, every interaction you have with bankers, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
As soon as you start putting a guard up and being someone you're supposed to be instead of who you are, like people lose all trust in you and they know that they're not seeing who you really are and they get worried that maybe there's something that you're hiding. And so you really have to be confident in yourself and in your ability to do the job and just
Yeah.
come across as a normal person. And that's easier said than done. But I think that especially kind of just getting feedback from multiple people in this program, that was helpful and kind of instead of coming through as like a fake person, coming through as who I am.
Yeah. And I guess also like just playing to your strengths too, right? Like obviously you did 7 years of data room sales and you might think that, I mean, people might think like sales has nothing to do with finance, but actually like investment banking is very much a sales job, especially like the more senior you get and the more you progress up the ladder. And so that actually I would say is quite relevant, right? And also just you having been around the banking, I guess, ecosystem, and you kind of know how to speak the language, and you kind of know how to interact with these people, and I think that's a great strength, and you probably had that a lot of other candidates might not have had, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the sales skills they definitely like because it means that you're likely to be around for a while and like you're interested in the VP role and the MD role, and so they want people that are going to stay. And then yeah, I mean I think the MBA really eliminates any of the concerns about your ability to do the job. And so then the last thing they want to know is like, do you know what you're really getting into, and is that what you really want? And so I think in my experience, since I'd spent so much time talking to bankers, like I knew exactly what I was getting into, and so just learning to verbalize that and seeing that value and like not focusing on the fact that like I hadn't been doing modeling the last few years. Like no one really cared about that because you can learn how to model and it's much harder to learn how to sell and it's much harder to really know what investment banking is like.
Right, right. And I mean, now that you have the offer, you have another 5 or 6 months to go and learn how to model. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of time to learn how to do that, and it's not rocket science.
If,
So
if I were to do it again, I would do the training the street now, like after I have the offer, because it was definitely a waste of time. And like I think if I was working on my story more then, or just reading more trends or being more knowledgeable, that would have paid bigger dividends in the interviews at the end of the day. Then no one asked me anything about any modeling functions, and so yeah, I don't think that did really anything for me. But it took 2 months, so.
yeah, I mean, oh, that was a 2 month process.
I mean, it's technically a 6 week program, but I wasn't being perfectly efficient. But yeah, I mean, it took like 3 or 4 hours a day for 2 months.
Wow. Okay. Um, and you signed up for that on your own. That wasn't like a part. That wasn't through like it wasn't sponsored by work or anything.
No,
Right?
no, I paid about I think $3,500 for the, and then it turns out that the banks pay for it again when you start training, and a lot of banks use the exact same program. So I'm just going to do it again.
That's true. I did change industry when I first started thinking, but no, I think like that's a really good point, which is a lot of people confuse learning how to do the job with learning how to get the job. And I understand why that's like intuitively that seems to make sense, but in actuality, like once you've gone to the interview, you realize that like learning how to interview well actually has very little to do with like learning how to build financial models, because like they just don't ask you to build financial models in these interviews. They just ask you these questions verbally, and you have to be able to explain concepts in like a concise and coherent way, which is very different from like, oh, knowing Excel functions and shortcuts and how to link things up together and whatnot, right? And so I think a lot of people kind of like put the cart before the horse, and they're like learning how to build financial models before they even have like a solid conceptual understanding of the underlying concepts. And that's when like a lot of the modeling stuff doesn't really make sense to you, because you're like kind of like you're going through the motions, but you don't really understand what you're doing. Versus like now that you have a solid understanding of like the three statements and valuation and M&A and LBO and all these things conceptually, if you were to go back and go through that exact same program now, it would probably make a lot more sense, because now you're just translating the things you already understanding into a spreadsheet, which like that part is easy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will make a lot more sense now that I kind of have the background. But yeah, I would. My advice for any technical prep is to start as small as possible and focus on the concepts, and then kind of scale out as you have time. Because like you can spend an infinite amount of time on more advanced questions, but ultimately, 95% of the questions I got are like pretty basic. And I even made mistakes in some interviews on those pretty basic ones because I was getting so worried about advanced details that no one cares about. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like, and like we can wrap up on this one, but like that's also a really good piece of advice, which is like, I think a lot of times people are so worried about the technical part of the interview because they think like, oh, if I make even just like a single mistake, then I'm done. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they spend all their time trying to like learn the technicals. And then people tend to, I know you didn't do this, but a lot of people in my experience tend to neglect the behavioral side of the preparation process because they think that, yeah, that's just like talking about yourself is pretty easy. Like anyone can do that. Right. But in reality, like, and I know like I feel like your behavioral interviews are really strong because like we did mock interviews and stuff. If your behavioral interview is really strong, like that is way more important than being completely perfect on the technical side. Because like if you're perfect on the technical side, but your stories kind of suck, like they're just not gonna hire you. Like nobody cares. Like it's way more important that they like who you are as a person and that they think they can get along with you and they think they want to spend 16 hours in the office with you versus like, oh, does this person know like I don't know how the DCF works, just like that stuff. Like you said, they're going to train you on. You're going to have a basic understanding of it to show that you've done the work, but like you don't need to be completely perfect, right?
Yeah. I mean, I got offers from jobs where I missed a technical, and I got dinged from offers where I got every technical right. And so I view the technicals as kind of like you got to get like a 90% plus for sure. And if they give you the opportunity to bail yourself out, that like you usually need to be able to do that. But the behaviorals are like, why should we hire you, right? Right, and like so that's really the real interview. The other part is just like a checkbox of like, is this good enough or not? And so yeah, I mean, the behavioral stuff is really like it's not just like talking about yourself; it's like selling yourself, and that's like a big difference, right? Selling yourself without sounding too salesy.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. That's great stuff, man. I think like guys, for those of you who are listening to this, maybe you're an MBA student, maybe you're about to go to business school, or maybe you just started and recruiting's going to be happening very soon for you. And you're looking for that additional competitive edge when it comes to this very selective process, then I want to encourage you guys to reach out, schedule a call with our team. We can have a chat, learn more about your situation, see what it is that you feel like you need help with, because obviously everyone's different. And if we feel like it's a good fit and that we can help you with what you need, then we would love to work with you. If not, then no biggie. Like then we'll just give you some advice and send you on your way, and you can use the resources that are available to you through school or whatever, right? But if that's something that you're interested in, then you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you. All right. And John, I want to thank you for, again, taking the time to talk to us. I know you're a busy guy. And also just for sharing your experiences and insights with all of our listeners. And I know this was very helpful for them as well. And so huge congrats again on going to City. And I actually have another client who's a analyst there right now. I should connect you guys so you guys can talk. But don't be a stranger. Let's stay in touch and look forward to seeing all the success that you have, man.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for all the help you gave me, and looking forward to being in touch with members of the program for some time to come.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to wrap it up here, and then we'll be back with more of these client interviews for you guys in the near future. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.